Chapter 15, Route 91 Harvest Music Festival, Las Vegas, Nevada. Part 1, Sunday, October 1st, 2017. There are four cornerstones that make up the story of twins Ole and Arne Anderson: the approaching menace of Nazi Germany in Europe, the Norwegian Lutheran Memorial Church, professional wrestling, and country music. It was the threat of invasion by Germany that ratcheted up the migration of Norwegians from their homeland to the United States, and more specifically to Minnesota, where a great many of their ancestors had settled during the 1800s. Unlike the 1800s, most Norwegians settled in Minnesota's larger cities, especially Minneapolis and St. Paul. The Norwegians that did settle in Minneapolis inevitably found their way to Norwegian Lutheran Memorial Church, one of only several churches using Norwegian as the primary liturgical language. This is where the future parents of Christopher Anderson met, as well as the mother and father of his future bride, Nora. It's also where Christopher and Nora met, same as each of their parents, on a chilly September Sunday in September 1977 at the Kirkekaffe, church coffee, after service. The church was looking for musicians to participate in their annual Leif Erikson Festival in October, held each year celebrating Norwegian artists, especially musical artists. Christopher and Nora, by chance standing next to each other, raised their hands. Christopher was a gifted guitar and banjo player, Nora a guitar and auto harp player after her musical idol, Mother Maybelle Carter of the Carter family. They looked at each other, smiled, and chatted while they sipped their coffee. The very first item of business Christopher and Nora covered was their love of country music, specifically the older, more traditional music that used to be referred to as hillbilly music in the 1920s and 30s. Nora loved the Carter family. Christopher loved Jimmie Rodgers. They both loved Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys with their Western swing sound, Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys, Flatt and Scruggs, and Patsy Cline. Both lived at home while attending the University of Minnesota. Business major for him, nursing for her. Both had played in not-so-popular local country bands. Both were rabid Minnesota Viking fans. But it was while sitting in the church steps, chatting away, oblivious to the chill, that they found out each other's hidden pleasure, something they tried to keep to themselves, away from family and friends. They loved professional wrestling, especially the local product, the American Wrestling Association. They both knew all the wrestling slang phrases: babyface, heel, kayfabe, mark. They both had been to live shows, including the television tapings over at WTCN-TV Channel 11 for AWA All-Star Wrestling. They both hated the present AWA champion, heel Nick Bockwinkel, and they had both met and chatted with the co-owner and former, also future, AWA champion, babyface Vern Gagne. They decided to work up a duet for the Leif Erikson Festival, a take on the famous country instrumental Dueling Banjos. Christopher was on piano, Nora started on guitar. Just before the song took off in a fast fury of notes, Nora stood up, yelled, "Stop!" As the crowd laughed and applauded, she quickly grabbed her auto harp and kept up with Christopher note for note. They brought down the house. That night, they went on their first date to WTCN-TV and a taping of AWA All-Star Wrestling. They dated throughout college. After they graduated with honors in May 1979, Christopher and Nora were married Saturday, June 16, 1979, at the church where they first met. They honeymooned in New York, attending a Worldwide Wrestling Federation show at Madison Square Garden, featuring Bruno Sammartino, Haystacks Calhoun, Baron Mikhail Cicluna, Chief Jay Strongbow, and Tito Santana in one of his first matches. They also headed to Greenwich Village and were lucky enough to get seats in the bottom line for two concerts, Carl Perkins and Janis Ian. As their lives progressed in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, first Nora, then Christopher began to feel that there was something more out there. She was a surgical nurse at St. Joseph's Hospital in St. Paul. He was an independent commercial insurance agent working both the Minneapolis and St. Paul area. They were both particularly good at what they did, They just didn't enjoy doing it. Every night they'd come home, too exhausted to do much of anything other than eat, and occasionally sit in their living room playing guitars, learning new licks. One such night was Friday, January 20th, 1984. They both had lousy days. 2 surgeons had yelled at Nora for handing them the wrong instruments. One large client canceled all his business policies on Christopher and went with a competitor, all because it took an hour for Christopher to get back to him. And it was cold. No, it was damn cold. After close to 2 hours of sniping and picking at each other over every minor detail that came up. Could you take your boots off outside the door? What, and freeze my feet? How come you always get the garage? I'm on call, that's why. They suddenly stopped, sat there staring at each other, reading each other's minds like married people in love can. Got up from the table, leaving dirty dishes and half-eaten chicken. She grabbed her guitar and auto harp, he grabbed his banjo. And just like that chilly October day at the festival, he started those familiar first notes of dueling banjos. And when they got to the duel with banjo and auto harp, they went at it. For a good 45 minutes to an hour, or so family legend has it. He would pick, she would follow. Then she would pick, he would follow. Seamlessly, almost effortlessly, trading leads back and forth. It came to them both almost at the same time. A music store. For all kinds of stringed instruments, electric to acoustic, bluegrass to country to rock. Doing something all day, every day that they would love doing. Talking, selling, teaching, music. He always loved her name, Nora. Different, special, maybe even a little mysterious in a weird Norwegian sort of way. And so Nora's Music Center it was. Christopher found them a great location in the downtown East Bohemian Flats area near the University of Minnesota campus. 3,000 square feet with small rooms that could turn into space for teaching or trial playing new instruments. They used every cent they could get their hands on. Filled the place with all kinds of stringed instruments and sheet music, picks and tuners, strings, and even a small collection of harmonicas. They advertised in every bit of free media they could find, from university bulletin boards to interviews on the growing public radio scene, even placing billboards in front of every music venue they could find. They personally met with every music teacher they could discover, offering them discounts if they'd send their students to Nora's. Then, just before the grand opening, the store's namesake found out she was pregnant. Shortly after the grand opening, she found out she was pregnant with twins. It wasn't until month 7 in February that the pregnancy began to slow her down. At 5'6" she looked like that point like she was going to give birth to a basketball. So Christopher propped her up in front of the cash register, which had happily been in constant use since opening day, Monday, August 20th. She held court, strumming the auto harp between customers until she was physically forced into bed rest from March until her due date, April 20th. It was during the last couple of months that they seriously began talking about names for the babies. Almost immediately, both had thought of Ole and Arn. Being the huge wrestling fans they were, they'd heard of the reforming of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, a tag team that had been extremely popular in the National Wrestling Alliance, NWA. The original Wrecking Crew had Ole Anderson, along with brother Gene Anderson. They won several titles together from the mid-70s to the early 80s, with the appearance of nephew Arn Anderson in 1985. The NWA reformed the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Both Nora and Christopher knew that no one was related. In fact, Ole's real name was Alan Robert Rogowski. Arn's was Martin Anthony Lund. Rogowski was, however, born in Minneapolis. Marty Lund was far enough away from Minnesota that he couldn't even have been a kissing cousin. He was from Rome, Georgia. Yet that didn't stop the Andersons, including the spelling on the last name. Ole and Arn it was. Ole was the firstborn at 10:15 a.m., Arn at 10:30 a.m. Ole and Arn grew up surrounded by music. Literally. Because their mom and dad were just getting the store up and running, the little crew took over one of the teaching rooms. As mom or dad would teach students how to play an instrument, Ole and Arn would react to the sounds they heard. If a pupil was hitting the notes, that pupil would hear contented gurgles along with mixed laughter. If there were challenges, the crying would begin. The little crew were tough, but fair judges. They also inherited their parents' aptitude for string instruments and, amazing for that day and time, the love of country music. In time, Ole would become very proficient in the mandolin and guitar. Arn, like his dad, the guitar and banjo. What the little crew didn't inherit was mom and dad's physiques. Nora was 5'6", maybe 115, 120 pounds soaking wet, with a few rocks in her pocket. Christopher was about 5'10", maybe 150 to 160 pounds after a big steak dinner. Both boys would end up 6 feet 1 inches with 235 pounds of rock-solid muscle in their frames. Happily for Nora and Christopher, their boys loved professional wrestling even more than they did. They'd watch all wrestling program on TV as much as they could. They'd attend every show that came into town. It didn't matter what the organization. NWA, WCW, World Championship Wrestling, WWF, WWE, World Wrestling Federation or Entertainment, even the last official TV taping on August 11, 1990 for their first love, the AWA, which the family, with Ole and Arn dressed in burgundy wrestling tights with their initials on the front, like their namesakes, and the little crew on the back. Besides watching the last taping, among the wrestlers the kids got to meet and have their pictures taken with were Larry Zbyszko, Vern Gagne's son Greg Gagne, and Wahoo McDaniel. As Nora's Music Center grew to 2, 3, then 4 locations, Minneapolis, St. Paul wide, including the Mall of America, the family spent even more time together. They'd play music at various bluegrass country festivals in the Midwest, amazing audiences by flipping instruments around to each other and never missing a note, until Arn conked his mom on the nose with a banjo. Nora and Christopher attended the little crew's football, baseball, wrestling matches through grade school, high school, and all the way through the University of Minnesota, where both boys had received partial wrestling scholarships and wrestled varsity all 4 years. Christopher had insisted both Ole and Arn major in business administration. He knew what they wanted to do. He just wanted to make sure that either had something to fall back on or that they would know what to do with all that money should they succeed. Ole and Arn graduated from the university in May 2007, both with a BS in Business Administration, both 4-year varsity wrestling letter recipients, both with a professional wrestling career firmly in their sights. But as any great wrestling fan will tell you, amateur wrestling and professional wrestling are 2 entirely different animals. Amateur wrestling is not choreographed. There are winners and losers based on strength, technical skill, and stamina. The purpose was to cause enough pain and exhaustion to either have your opponent tap out, be pinned, both shoulders on the mat, or lose by points garnered through the successful completion of various holds against the opponent's will. Professional wrestling is choreographed. The winners and losers are known in advance by the wrestlers. However, their matches require just as much technical skill, just as much strength, and just as much endurance, with the added caveat that you were not to injure your fellow performer. In other words, what constituted success in a professional wrestling ring was the successful completion of various holds designed to make the audience believe the opponent was in pain, too tired to continue, or about to tap out or be pinned. Ole and Arn knew very well how to perform the former, and basically knew what they'd seen on TV and at pro matches to perform the latter, which meant from a professional wrestling standpoint, they knew next to nothing. It was back to school for the little crew, professional wrestling school. There were about 10 or so throughout the country that were well known, respected, and not rip-off joints designed to take a performer's money while not moving them towards their dream. One of the absolute best was in Eldon, Missouri, about 8.5 hours from downtown Minneapolis. Plus, they'd seen the owner's final AWA match at the last TV taping on August 11, 1990. Harley Race was a legendary name among wrestlers with a career spanning 33 years, an 8-time world champion, holder of countless other titles, a superb manager, excellent in TV interviews, and would be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004. From their research, the Harley Race Wrestling Academy was consistently rated among the top 5 schools in the country. Plus, the children of famous retired wrestlers, Henning, DiBiase, Murdoch, Steamboat, went to the school, even knowing more about the industry than most people, which said quite a bit for the Academy's dedication and preparation. The Academy also featured their own in-house promotion, World League Wrestling, where students could practice their taught skills in front of a wrestling sophisticated paying audience. The boys passed their physical audition and entered the Academy in July of 2007. While they were busy learning their craft, Christopher and Nora were beginning to downsize theirs. All 4 of Nora's locations had been successful. However, the Andersons were beginning to miss why they had opened a music store in the first place. They were overseeing their locations, but they weren't involved in the day-to-day interaction with customers. They were beginning to forget how much fun it was to listen to a young woman or man figure out a new song, or even just a new lick or chord progression. They were missing pulling out their guitar, banjo, or auto harp, and having an impromptu jam session in the store with whoever was there. They were making money, lots of it, but they weren't having fun. The downsizing went slowly, selling their smallest store located in St. Paul. They were not happy with the manager they had hired in their original Minneapolis location, so they terminated him and sent their 4-store area manager over to manage that location, keeping her at her present salary. Their Mall of America location was easy to close. Mall management kept raising their lease until it became impossible for them to make the percentage of profit necessary to keep its 4,000 square foot selling area filled with product at a reasonable cost for their customers. They kept the best employees, moving them to the 2 remaining stores. With the large store in St. Paul and their original location in Minneapolis filled with exceptionally talented retailers and musicians, and with the part-time help of a friend and talented CPA, Henry Oliver Johnson, Christopher and Nora felt free to act like owners, as they put it. Drop into a store, help with lessons, in their wheelhouse, of course, play a little music with customers and employees, enjoy what they created. They weren't making as much in gross revenue. However, their net was almost the same as before, after taking out the equation the behemoth known as the Mall of America store. Meanwhile, their sons had decided on a uniquely similar path. After spending almost 12 months in the academy, the little crew, now their official name, they decided early on they wanted to wrestle as a tag team, spent an additional 12 months in World League Wrestling, honing their craft, their characters. Just like the original crew, the little crew were heels, or bad guys, and their out-of-the-ring media interviews. They also had to resolve challenges from those that thought there might have been a copyright infringement on their names. Until birth certificates were produced, backstories were provided, and promises were made that the little crew would not become the Minnesota Wrecking Crew until contracts were signed and monies changed hands. Because of the amount of monies requested, there wouldn't be a name change in the boys' immediate futures. Although pro wrestling was, at the time, on the decline, there still were plenty of independent promotions throughout the country, as well as Japan and Mexico. The little crew decided to see the world, as they told Christopher and Nora. From New England, the Chaotic Wrestling, Millennium Wrestling Federation, New England Championship Wrestling, Power League Wrestling, down the East Coast Wrestling Association in Delaware, National Wrestling League in Maryland, Jersey All-Pro Wrestling, and United Wrestling Coalition in New Jersey, Northeast Wrestling in New York, Combat Zone Wrestling, and Keystone State Wrestling Alliance in Pennsylvania. Into the Midwest, All-American Wrestling in Chicago, Main Event Championship Wrestling in Indiana, Metro Pro Wrestling in Kansas, Juggalo Championship Wrestling in Detroit, Heartland Wrestling Association in Ohio. Through the South, Full Impact Pro in Florida, Ohio Valley Wrestling in Kentucky, Premier Wrestling Experience, CWF Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, and Omega Championship Wrestling in North Carolina. Innovate Wrestling and South States Wrestling in Tennessee, Texas All-Star Wrestling, and up and down the West Coast, Ultra Championship Wrestling Zero in Utah, West Coast Wrestling Connection in Oregon, All Pro Wrestling and Empire Wrestling Federation in California. The Little Crew became recognized nationally as one of the premier tag teams to sign. The Little Crew were not just wrestlers. They were, like their folks, retailers. Before and after every card, there they'd be in full wrestling gear, selling autographed photos, t-shirts, sweatshirts, caps, keychains, bumper stickers, Little Crew college-style jackets in Minnesota burgundy and gold, posters, coffee travel, and home mugs, bottle and can koozies, even the Crew is Too Cool Blues Brothers-style sunglasses, which the boys always wore to the ring. There were many nights when the take from the retail operation far surpassed what they were getting paid to wrestle, which was fine with them. Since they were independents, they could pick and choose when and where to perform. The additional income from sales allowed them the luxury of resting their bodies when they were injured, taking days or even weeks off when they needed to, so that when they were wrestling, they could provide the fans the best they had to offer. Plus, there were two extremely popular music stores in Minneapolis, St. Paul that were selling their gear also, providing them with not only a third income stream, but also a way to stay in front of the hometown fans. Nora and Christopher tried to see as many of the boys' matches as they could. The only challenge was they usually were the only ones cheering for the Crew rather than against them. Ole and Arn had to remind their folks several times that they needed to boo their own sons so that they could keep kayfabe, stay in character. Every time they heard their folks cheering for them, they, and their hated opponents, would start laughing, break character, and the match would end up in the toilet. The one positive note is that Mom and Dad would always bring instruments with them. There were many occasions when a little dueling banjos, Orange Blossom Special, or Foggy Mountain Breakdown would send wrestling fans scurrying over to the boys' retail table, especially when Ole and Arn joined in. There are many wrestling fans around the country that have photographic evidence of a scene that no one would have believed unless there was that kind of tangible proof. There in the photo would be this slight graying older couple, he with a banjo, she with an auto harp, picking furiously between two twin full costumed wrestlers, 6'1", 235 pounds each, playing their banjo or guitar at the same frenetic pace. As the Little Crew's career improved, so did Nora's music. Musicians from not only the bluegrass and country world, but also rock and roll, even heavy metal, would drop by the stores for equipment and to jam with the owners. And to a woman or man, they loved to hear about their pro wrestling sons, so much so that both the Andersons at home and the Andersons on the road would hear stories about how this rock star or that pop sensation would tell this great story from the stage about this musically talented little couple in Minnesota with twin wrestlers for sons. Sometimes they'd even show off a Little Crew t-shirt or cap they bought. Always bought. Either Christopher or Nora would always explain that the Crew's products were not theirs to give away. 2017 was shaping up to be a great year for the Andersons. The Little Crew had finally appeared on national TV, first on New Japan Pro Wrestling and JPW, World Pro Wrestling from Tokyo, Japan in early January, then with New Japan's U.S. partner Ring of Honor Wrestling February through April, then OVW Wrestling through Ohio Valley Wrestling in May. Finally, Impact Wrestling in June and July. Nora's Music Center continued its popularity so much so that Christopher and Nora were contemplating the idea of selling the business to their present employees and spend the rest of their days booing their sons around the country. The pinnacle of all the Andersons' hopes came in a phone call Christopher and Nora received in their Minneapolis store on Monday, September 17th. "Hi, Mom, it's us. Ole!" Nora could always tell the boys' voices apart. Christopher was occasionally fooled. "I thought you and Arn were headed to Mexico." "Well, Mom, we got a little sidetracked. I know you hate speakerphones, but please put us on speakerphone there and we'll put you on here." "Where's here?" "Mom, speakerphone." "Okay, you're on speakerphone. Dad's right beside me. This had better be good, boys. We got a store full of customers." Ole and Arn said it together. "We're in Stanford, Connecticut." Nora started to cry. Christopher was a little confused until the lights suddenly came on and everyone was home. That's the home of... Ole and Arn said it together. We just signed with the WWE. The store erupted in cheers. Nora and Christopher hugged, everyone high-fiving and running to grab an item of the now exceedingly popular Little Crew paraphernalia. It was Arn's turn now. Okay, guys, listen up. We told Mr. McMahon about your love of wrestling and country music. On his dime, us four are headed on September 30th and October 1st to Vegas to the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival. On Monday the 2nd, he's going to fly all four of us to Denver, where we're going to open the Raw telecast at the Pepsi Center in Denver, Colorado. He said to bring your instruments. Depending on time, we may be able to play a little something in the ring. Ole now. Mom, Dad, you're going to love this. First, we're finally going to be baby faces. You can cheer for us. And guess who our road agent is going to be? Marty Lund, the original Arn Anderson. Both Nora and Christopher started crying. When Nora and Christopher received their flight and hotel information from WWE headquarters, there was a note attached. Looking forward to working with the new Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Marty. Arn. Christopher and Nora flew from Minneapolis at 8:50 a.m. on Delta Flight 730, arriving in Las Vegas at 10:14 a.m., there to greet them at the terminal were their grinning boys, decked out head to toe in WWE new Minnesota Wrecking Crew clothing. After their proud parents donned their new Wrecking Crew t-shirts, they all headed for the limo and their destination in Las Vegas, the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Directly across the street was the Route 91 Harvest Country Music Festival in Las Vegas Village, a 15-acre lot used for outdoor performances. Their suites were adjoining on the 30th floor, 31, 34, and 135, with a beautiful view of Las Vegas and especially the festival grounds. The family walked the grounds, walked the strip, had a huge dinner at Strip Steak in the hotel, then walked across the street and caught the tail end of night 2 of the festival. Normally, Nora and Christopher would have loved to end an evening listening to live music, but this was different. 22,000 people, young people mostly, lots of alcohol, lots of bad language, lots of glitzy nonsense. Not their cup of tea. The boys were a different story. Like performing in the ring, they fed off the crowd. They loved the glitz and glamour. They loved the loudness and brashness of it all. Mom and Dad were thinking to themselves, and were surprised later when they found out the other was thinking the same thing, that this was a great introduction for their boys into the world of the WWE. Sunday, October 1st, 2017 was a sunny, warm day in Las Vegas. After a leisurely breakfast in their suite, the family went to the hotel pool, where Nora and Christopher kept giggling at the approving stares their boys were receiving from their fellow guests. They were certainly ready for their grand appearance on Raw Monday night. Both rock solid without steroids or supplements, both very health conscious, both a great trainer and motivator for the other. What tickled the parents even more was the autographs Ole and Arn gave out. People who'd seen them wrestle, who were here for the festival, and who wanted to party with the Little Crew that night. Arn and Ole took turns telling the fans about their new opportunity with WWE, the history behind why they were called the Little Crew, and now how honored they were going to be to become the new Minnesota Wrecking Crew. By the time Mom and Dad quietly snuck away, the boys had 50 people surrounding their lounge chairs asking all kinds of wrestling questions. They'll do just fine, they said to each other, proud smiles on their faces. After what was a rarity for them, a nice long nap, Nora and Christopher were dressed and ready when the boys came in, but not for the festival. Boys, your dad and I are going to walk the strip, maybe catch an early dinner, then head to bed early. Please don't tell Mr. McMahon we begged out. It's been such a treat for us so far. The best part was seeing all the fans you boys had in Las Vegas. Her voice trailed off. We're just so enormously proud of you, the men you've become. You go out tonight and have fun. Just be home early. You got a big day tomorrow. Hugs and kisses all around. Don't worry, Mom. I'll get my little party boy brother home and in bed by midnight. Older brother by 15 minutes, Ole said, Me? Why don't you guys stay for a couple hours and let me tell you some stories about the choir boy here? And Arn would have, but their folks were headed out the door. Love you both. Have fun. We will. Love you too. Christopher and Nora had always liked the Australian term, a walkabout. That's what they proceeded to do. They walked into all the major hotels, played 1 or 2 slot machines, walked back out. Ate along the way, looked at some people, did some window shopping at the fancy shops, fantasized about having a Nora's in Vegas, and headed back. And with every step, they could hear the festival all up and down the strip. They hoped the twins were having a good time, but not too good a time. Hoped they ran into their fans and were getting some major ego stroking, but not getting bought too many beers, along with enjoying the music. They arrived back at their suite at 9:45, opened the shades so they could look at the festival 34 floors below, and congratulated each other on making the right decision. At 10:05, they were still staring out the window when they heard pops coming from above them. Firecrackers? Champagne corks? Then, what they would later describe as loud jackhammering filled the room. Why would they be jackhammering now? It took Nora only a few moments to realize what the sound was. Her father had been a hunter. Oh my God, that's gunfire. She raced to the hotel phone. Please help, someone above us is shooting. I'm in 3135, right above us. Someone is shooting. Christopher was still looking at the festival. He turned to his wife. They're shooting at the festival. There are people on the ground. The operator told Nora police were on the way to sit tight. Suddenly, as if a thunderbolt had hit them both, they looked at each other. Our babies, our boys are there. Oh, dear God, no. It was Christopher who held Nora back as the jackhammering continued for what seemed like hours, but was only 10 minutes, screaming, I've got to get to my babies. I've got to find my babies. Nora desperately tried to get out of Christopher's hold, kicking, punching, jackhammering going on. 12 bursts total, screaming, begging, make it stop, save my boys, save my babies. Finally it stopped. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Let me go. Punching Christopher in the face, knocking him to the ground. She raced out of the suite, caught an elevator, and was gone before he could catch up to her. He got to the lobby, police everywhere. No Nora. Headed toward the festival. Halfway across the street, he heard her. That scream. That terrible, heart-wrenching, soul-crushing, gut-punching scream. She'd found them, heads half blown off, vacantly staring at their mother. He found her kneeling between them, her arms around them, screaming and crying into the dirt. EMTs and 2 what appeared to be African-American women volunteers, then police were trying to move. I'm her husband, her father. Please let her have this moment with them. They stepped back. She cried, she moaned, she whispered their names. She told them she loved them. She kissed each of them on a bloody cheek. I love you, Oli. I love you, Art. She stood up, looked at the police. Okay, thank you. She walked past her husband, not acknowledging his presence, and down the street, disappearing into the crowd. It was up to Christopher to give the police a statement, Christopher to identify the boys at the morgue, Christopher to take the call from Mr. McMahon, giving him the grim news and thanking him when the offer of the WWE jet was made to take the family back to Minnesota. It was Christopher who began making the arrangements, Christopher who called their accountant Henry Oliver Johnson to make funds available for the funeral, Christopher who packed all the suitcases, Christopher who broke down sobbing as he packed his boys' new Minnesota Wrecking Crew stuff back into its own case. It was Christopher, alone, having a cup of coffee at the hotel coffee shop at 6 a.m. when Nora came in. She sat across from him. They looked at each other for a good long while. She started. I'm sorry I hit you. I forgave you the moment you did it. I understood. I wanted to protect them too. But even if we had been there, what would they have done? Protected us, I know. I thought about it all last night. You had a walkabout. Yeah, I did. I needed to figure out why. Why our boys? Her eyes filled with tears. Why? They had everything going for them. Why? You know what I came up with? Same as I did. Nothing. Nothing. Right. No rhyme. No reason. There's got to be a reason. She stared off. They got back to Minnesota. The funeral was held at the church, reception afterwards at the store. They received a beautiful, genuinely nice letter from the entire McMahon family, along with the 2 paychecks their sons would have earned on that Monday Raw in Denver. For expenses, the checks read. They also each received a slightly oversized card with a Columbine postmark. They both signed up that evening for the site, one after the other. Las Vegas 90, Nora. Las Vegas 91, Christopher. Both with the same mentor, Navy Yard 14. They had no reason or passion for the stores anymore. Once they returned from Las Vegas, they, along with their accountant, Henry Johnson, completed the sales of the stores to their employees. Nora and Christopher never visited the stores again. They chatted off and on with Navy Yard 14 after they joined the site, always with the same thought. Why? Why to them? Why? Maxine had briefly covered the plan. When they expressed an interest, she set up an appointment with Ray and them for Friday, July 6th at 12 noon at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, Chili's, at the MSP Mall in Terminal 1. Ray left Boston at 6 a.m. on American Airlines Flight 2159. Max, another fucking early-ass flight? What are you doing to me? Stopping in Reagan National for 2 hours, 21 minutes so Maxine could meet and brief him. Then Flight 4636 to Minneapolis-St. Paul, arriving at 11:50 a.m. Just enough time for Ray to head to Chili's and spot a slight, older couple in the corner. Dirty blondish gray hair, thin, very Nordic looking. Hi, I'm Ray Wilson. Ray, I'm Christopher Anderson. This is my wife, Nora. Thin-lipped, no smiles. Okay, thought Ray, be careful here. I appreciate you meeting me here. I know most airports. No trouble. Tell us what you came here to tell us. Ray took a quick look around. Nothing suspicious? He told them about the plan. No reaction. He told them about the plan from another angle. No reaction. Okay. Time to close this puppy up and get to Wisconsin. Ray stood up. Well, Christopher and Nora, I appreciate you meeting with me. I would ask that you not... Nora. We're in. Ray sat down. Really? Surprising. Why? Nora spoke for them both. That's what you just answered. Why? Why did our sons die? Why? Before they were finally getting their break, are their beautiful heads blown apart? Why? The reason why, Ray, is on the pages in the site dedicated to Las Vegas. The killer had 21 suitcases he brought in, carrying 24 different firearms, including 14 AR-15 style rifles with bump stocks. It was those bump stocks attached to the AR-15s that caused the jackhammering sound 2 floors above us. It allowed the killer of my sons the opportunity to fire 1,000 rounds in 10 minutes. Christopher touched her arm. She tossed him a murderous look. He took his hand back. Ray. Nora, what your husband is trying to say without saying it is, we all hurt here. You're preaching to the choir. I lost the love of my life. I had to identify her bullet-stitched body. You found your sons in a field. We will never, ever be able to rid ourselves of those sites. What we cannot do is alert those people behind me that finally, we're going to do something about it. Okay? Nora looked at her husband. Sorry, I'm not myself. Honey, you haven't been. Either have I. Ray has given us the opportunity to right a wrong. Ray called Maxine from the next terminal. They're in. That's not surprising. I just have this feeling they'd be helpful to you as time gets closer. Unless she kills him first. Uneasy laughter. Yeah, there are some issues there. I'll try to work on that a little bit. Okay, Max. Off to Wisconsin.